Do you know it's almost been a year since the submarine went down to the Titanic? What was that thing called again? It was called the Titan, right?
I think.
Well, anyways, hope they're doing well. Yeah, that was a total tragedy. Definitely learned a lesson. Don't let billionaires take you underneath the sea with a rainy dingy submarine. Speaking about the Titanic, remember how obsessed we were with it?
Dude, we watched the Titanic, I think almost every sleepover.
Yep. Literally, every single time we would go to the playground, we would come up with a new scenario on the jungle gym, how we were sinking in the Titanic.
Yeah, and we even tried to do a spoof of it.
Yes, we did. Complete with the whole drawing scene. It was very cringe, as we were as children. But you know what? At least we can look back on it and smile. But the people on the Titanic had probably the worst luck. I feel so bad for all those people. They were just trying to enjoy a nice cruise. And for some people, this was like their whole life savings. Their whole life was on the line. And yeah, not a lot of people ended up making it due to stupid decisions by rich people and greedy people and people that maybe just didn't understand safety. It's crazy to think that you need enough life jackets and lifeboats for the people on board. But, that was maybe 200 years ago. So
I think that was 100 years ago.
how long ago was it?
I think it's 100, a little more than 100.
Oops.
It was I think it was 1912.
Okay. We're not doing that, but it's not on the Titanic. I have no idea when the Titanic happened. I just know it was a pretty okay movie.
Oh my god.
Today, we're going to be talking about a ship that ended up sinking. And this is actually a worse naval incident than the Titanic. But no one ever freaking talks about it. Okay, I've never been on a cruise ship. Full disclosure, I have no idea how it works. But I imagine there's hopefully enough space for you and your luggage, and you have a room and you can go in and watch the sea and hopefully not get seasick and enjoy all the luxurious snacks and the random pool that they have on board, because why swim in the ocean when you have a pool aboard? But the vessel that we're talking about today, the Le Joola, and I'm so sorry if I mispronounce it, but I will probably be mispronouncing it throughout the entire video if I am incorrect. There was an estimated 2,000 people aboard. There was barely enough room to walk on this thing. There were so many people on this boat. And it was supposed to be like a travel / cruise ship / carrier ship. It was just supposed to be a large boat, and it had done this thousands of times, except for on this day, tragedy would strike, and almost everyone on board would die. Hi, welcome to the Decomposing Flower podcast. We are excited to have you with us as we delve into some truly intriguing and occasionally very disturbing true crime cases or true event cases. I'm your host, Kira, and with me is Jen. Everything we say in our podcasts are information that we have gathered from testimonies, interviews, documents, and trustful sources. Anything we say is our own opinion. If we get any information wrong, and obviously I'm going to mispronounce some things in today's episode, so I'm so sorry in advance. I'm just really not good at understanding this language, but I am trying. Please feel free to let us know in the comments. We mean no disrespect to any of the victims or anyone affected by this case. Today, we're going to be discussing the Le Joola vessel that sank. Before we get started, I just wanted to give a few trigger warnings. We're going to be talking about a mass tragedy, So if you're not in the right headspace to listen to that, check out our other podcasts. Take care of yourself, rest up, and we'll see you in the next episode. So this ship was named Le Joola after the Joola people of southern Senegal, which is where it was sort of operating. It was constructed in Germany and delivered in the 1990s. So right before I was born. So, it was supposed to be legit. It was 79 meters long and 12 meters wide. And it weighed around 1,400 tons. And it had 2 motors. It was supposed to be decked out in some of the latest safety equipment available, especially at the time of its sinking. It was supposed to be top tier, but due to a lot of circumstances, that was unfortunately not going to help these people. The region where it operated heavily depended on this ferry to sell its produce to the rest of the country. It normally traveled twice a week, and it often carried women who sold mangoes and palm oil in Dakar. At the time, the ship had been out of service for almost a year, undergoing some strenuous repairs, which included the replacement of one of the engines, specifically the port engine. It was not completed by the time they put it back in the water, or allegedly, that's what sources say. We'll get into it a little bit later on in the case, but a lot of the things I'm going to say are alleged, as there sadly has been no justice in this case. And that's my own opinion. I'm not attacking any authorities or coming after any countries or trying to place any blame. I'm just saying there has been no justice. The ship was taking a route from Ziguinchor, from the Canamarance region, I butchered that, to the Senegalese capital, Dakar, when it ran into a super violent storm. Like, allegedly, the waves were maybe 20 feet high. Like, it was crazy. It was,
Wow.
yeah, it was not safe out there, especially given all the circumstances. This was farther out to sea than it was actually licensed to travel. So it shouldn't have been going this deep. The 2 engines it had was not equipped for this kind of deeper sea travel. Typically, when you're going out to open ocean, that's when you start to see like these massive boats, right? Like you've seen those carrier boats that are incredibly big. But this was just a little guy compared to them. Like I mentioned in the beginning of the episode, there was an estimated 2,000 people aboard this ship. About half of whom lacked the ticket to actually be on this thing. So like there were unregistered people all aboard this place. And we'll get into why this happened. This was actually 4 times the amount the ship could have carried. The large numbers of people sleeping on the deck and above the center of buoyancy further added to the instability on the open ocean and these massive waves coming at them. So things were not looking good. So officially, they say there's 1,928 people aboard the ferry, but sources say that it was over 2,000, so we're going to go with that. And it had a capacity of 536 passengers. 185 people boarded the ship from Carbonane, which is an island where there was no final port, where there was entry or exit for the passengers. So I don't think we'll ever know the exact number of passengers that were aboard, but the Senegalese organizations say that there were 1,034 travelers with tickets. The remaining passengers were either not required to hold tickets, so like they would be kids 5 or less, so like little babies, or just like whole families aboard this thing, or they would have been permitted to travel for free. It's historically done in developing countries that people who are struggling or don't have enough money sometimes get to travel for free. In mostly these developing countries, it's done out of solidarity. But allegedly, poorly paid ferry officials have been accused of taking a little bit extra for their own pocket to let these people aboard. A surviving freight worker noted from the number of tickets sold, he could see that there would have been a significant overcrowding situation aboard this vessel. Reportedly, as it set sail from within the shore, it was already tilting, but they let it go anyways.
Wow, that's crazy.
They didn't communicate at all. They didn't let them know that there was a problem. And it's like, maybe in the aviation world, there's this thing called just get there itis. So what happens is that there are the mega corporations. So for us in Canada, it's like Air Canada and WestJet. But for the States, it might be like Delta or something else. I'm not that familiar with other people's airlines. But anyways, so there's these mega corporations. So these pilots are under massive stress to get their passengers to their destination as fast as possible. People don't want to be aboard an airplane for longer than they have to already. There's also the stress of these mega corporations like, hey, we got to go faster. Hey, we got to get more passengers aboard. Like they have all these targets. And like for these pilots, they don't want to also be flying for 24 hours a day. That's exhausting for them. Like they want to go home to their families. They want to get proper rest. So normally, sometimes what happens is they push through what is supposed to be standard procedure and safety checks. What happened aboard the ship could have been a form of get-there-itis by the captain and the crew aboard. I'm not saying that's what's happening. It could have been a contributing factor towards this whole thing. So the vessel, which was already allegedly tilting, encountered this insane storm while it was navigating these deeper waters than it was supposed to. It threw all the passengers and cargo into the sea within 5 minutes. So when this thing went down, it went down fast. The survivors recalled the ferry overturning very quickly in the heavy rain, with one person being quoted as saying, the boat was tilting before it was capsizing, which caused a flood on board. Another survivor recounted as they were clinging to the ferry's keel after swimming through a partially open window that they were being tossed by the winds and the waves until they were able to find refuge on the overturned vessel. So survivors faced challenges such as finding life jackets and escaping from the vessel as it capsized, with some resorting to smash the portholes to escape. In an interview, a retired diver from the Senegalese Navy who had been in charge of security aboard the Le Joola until shortly before it sank recalled that the life jackets had been deliberately bound together to prevent passengers from accessing them. What? Excuse me? What do you mean to prevent passengers from accessing life jackets? They're there to save lives. And these people couldn't even get them apart because they're bound. He said,
What the?
Yeah, exactly. It was a mess. Anytime there was a small incident, people would rush to take one, as they should.
Uh-huh.
While many of the ship's passengers died during or immediately after the capsizing, a large number is speculated to have probably survived the initial capsizing, only to drown while awaiting rescue. In an interview, one passenger noted that approximately 20 individuals had succeeded in climbing onto the hull, and they remained there for several hours. All the while, they could hear cries beneath them, indicating some passengers were still alive in air pockets that were keeping the boat buoyant. So there were people inside screaming at the top of their lungs, trying to let anyone know that there were some people inside. And the survivors could only listen to their screams. You could hear bangs and screaming. And slowly, as the hours teetered on, the sounds got quieter and quieter until you could just hear the sea. It was truly devastating. Investigations later revealed that no alarm had been triggered and no distress signal had been sent out. It wasn't until 7 a.m. the next day authorities learned of the disaster from passing vessels. So not even these vessels like came over and picked them up and said like, hey, you guys okay? They went back to the Capitol, the car, and alerted them to let them know that, hey, there's some people on this ship that are upside down. You should probably go save them. Even then, their response was still delayed. According to a report by the Senegalese investigators, the Air Force did not dispatch a search and rescue aircraft until noon.
What?
Yeah. So instead, there were some insane and brave local fishermen that initially went out and recovered bodies and tried to rescue survivors. These people were just doing their job until they saw these people that needed help, and they did what no official would do. And they went out there and they saved people. Likely, the majority of people would be dead if it was not for these people. And even then, the people that survived was not a lot. They were able to rescue a few people and get a few bodies that were floating around. At 2 p.m., they rescued a 15-year-old boy. The boy confirmed there were still people alive inside of the ship. There were people still screaming then. Of the 64 passengers that survived, there were more than 600 women aboard. Only one woman survived, and she was pregnant at the time.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Only one.
So among the first responders was the diver that we mentioned a little bit ago. And upon reaching the vessel, he dove into the water and swam through the boat. And upon entering the restaurant area, he saw hundreds of bodies, some of which were still holding hands. Moving towards the bow of the ship, he was able to see the sealed first-class cabin, which still remained unflooded. Inside, some of the passengers gestured to the windows. However, they did not have the necessary equipment, such as welding torches, to breach the hull and open the cabin doors and risk everything flooding already. So later on, that diver went on to note that none of the passengers he saw in these cabins were rescued. So these rescue crew, the initial guys at least, they didn't have the proper equipment to save people inside a capsized vessel. Are you kidding me?
That's, that doesn't even make any sense.
The officials were told by vessels that drove by exactly what was happening. You have fishermen who are out here saving people who likely talked to the first responders, and no one brought the necessary material to save lives.
Yeah, I'm sorry, what?
Exactly. So the Le Joola remained capsized but afloat until 3 p.m., at which it finally sank, stern first, taking all those with it who were unable to get out of the ship. And may I just remind you, the first responders got there at 2 p.m., the guys who didn't have the necessary materials to save lives. So like I said, there was an estimated 2,000 people crammed aboard, which was 4 times the amount of people who should have been on there. This severe overcrowding exaggerated by the numbers of people who were actually sleeping on the open deck significantly compromised the stability of the ship, which caused a precarious weight distribution above the center of buoyancy. And there were unforgiving sea conditions, which created a recipe for disaster. Adding to the tragedy, the rescue operation was hampered by delays, with several hours passing by before assistance arrived. So there was a whole combination of factors that caused 2,000 people to lose their lives. Overcrowding, unauthorized route deviation, severe weather, delayed rescue response, and the ship wasn't even in working order, to be honest. All the rescue equipment was bundled up and inaccessible. Like, there was just so much shit that went wrong on this. It's a miracle that people even did survive. And this isn't even the tip of the ice. This is the tip of the iceberg, okay, to the frustration of this actual case. My blood is literally boiling as I get into the aftermath of this case and how fucking stupid it is. So in 2023, Senegal closed the investigation, which was a year after the incident. They placed the blame on the captain, Issa Diarra, who died during the incident. So there were a lot of people aboard this vessel, and some of which were French and international. The French court actually launched a lengthy investigation that implicated 7 Senegalese officials, but we'll get into that in a second, actually. So the ship was only 12 years old and built to be in service for 30 years old, but it had suffered a number of technical problems in the years before it capsized. So these problems have now been attributed to poor maintenance by the owners and not actual design or manufacturing flaws. So, like I mentioned, it's really a case of get there-itis. It's capitalism. It's people being greedy. These people had no chance of survival, let's be honest. So, at least 1,863 people died, although the exact number will never be known because there were so many unticketed people aboard. At least 444 children were among the victims. Among the dead, there's approximately 1,201 male victims, 382 female victims, and 70 just plain old unknown victims. The dead included passengers from at least 11 countries besides Senegal, Cameroon, Guinea, Uganda, Nigeria, France, Spain, Norway, Belgium, Lebanon, Switzerland, and the Netherlands. So this is an international case, to say the least, concerning the management of rescue, the operation of the ferry, and the reparation process, and let alone just their fucking safety. So remember how I talked about the French a little bit? So the families of the French victims refused the offer of compensation for the victims, and the judge, whose name is Jean Noel, issued an international arrest warrant against 9 officials, including the former prime minister, the transportation minister, and the head of the armed forces. The warrants charged them with negligent manslaughter and failure to help people in danger. This is where it gets freaking spicy, okay? So a Senegalese judge issued a warrant for the arrest of the French judge on charges of abuse of authority. Are you kidding me? What? So this judge is like, hey, you guys killed people because you didn't act fast enough. Like, where were you? And like, what are you guys doing to fix this issue? And they're like, hold on a second. You're under arrest for questioning us. So yeah, ultimately, the judge dropped the case because like, what are you supposed to do? Like, the government was coming after him. Understandably, I'd be freaking scared too. So even though they tried to get all those victims from the bottom of the ocean from the sunken vessel, it's still believed to still hold more bodies. So according to Senegal, like, case closed. The French courts just dismissed it, even though they found evidence against 7 of the officials. They just said Paris didn't have the jurisdiction to continue on with the case. So the Le Joola disaster highlighted the need for improved safety regulations and enforcement in the maritime industry. Not only that, like, why is the government trying to cover this up? I mean, again, I'm not coming for any countries. I'm just saying, if maybe you tried to save your people, we wouldn't be in this situation where we're still seeking justice. In the years since the disaster, Senegal has taken steps to improve maritime safety, including implementing new regulations and establishing a safety agency. The Le Joola disaster is a tragedy that should never be forgotten and is a reminder of the importance of safety and the need to ensure a disaster of this magnitude never happens again. And sadly, that's where we're at today with today's case. There's no justice. There's no word on any changes. It's just kind of swept under the rug. It's crazy how little also there is on this case, how little discourse. Like, if this was, I know at the beginning of today's case, I talked a little about the Titan, and that had everyone up in arms. And that was, what, 5 people? This was over 2,000 people, and no one's talking about it. Let us know what you think about today's case in the comments below. If you've heard anything or found anything in your own findings, let us know. But thank you so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed this case with as much information as we could tell you. Again, we meant no harm, and if anything we said was wrong, please let us know. And we'll see you in the next episode.